Rick, we always appreciate the time. Let's move on to running back. All right. And this is what gets stuck in our heads, I think, as college football fans as well. We got a Wisconsin back. We got a Georgia back. The Georgia back must be faster than the Wisconsin back, but you look at the 40 times, and that's not the case between Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, who I thought DeAndre was probably the best pro back, just again, watching the games and thinking, okay, who's going to project as a guy that's a multi-purpose guy that can get out of the backfield, catch the ball as well, versus Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin, who's more the traditional collegiate back, set him out, 5 to 7 yards back in the backfield and give him the ball.
Yeah, I think, Taylor, to me, he's my number one guy, and I feel like he's the Rodney Dangerfield this year, getting no respect. I mean, what else does this guy have to do? Tremendous college football production, keeps it between the tackles, has the size, has the speed, and, maybe just doesn't have the splash plays that a DeAndre Swift, the explosive, kind of more slasher style of running. So I think that, depending on system, depending on scheme, either one of these guys can come off the board first. I look at Kansas City there at the end of the draft, being able to select a guy like DeAndre Swift would be such a luxury for the Super Bowl champion team. Inject him into the mix with the Damian Williams, kind of a 1-2 punch there. But I think Taylor could actually be a workhorse back. I don't think there's too many guys at the NFL level. I could probably count on one hand how many guys are a feature back, but I think Jonathan Taylor is a guy who can tote the rock 300 plus times a year. And honestly, Mark, there's some teams in the league that have Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU as the top running back on the board, a very similar skill set to a Josh Jacobs. We saw him, I think, win Rookie of the Year with the Raiders. He can do a lot of that run, catch, block type of, triple threat at the next level. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he could be a dark horse now. He could be the first running back off the board.
Yeah, and he was the next guy I was going to mention because he would have been nowhere close to this in this conversation a year ago because he really didn't have the numbers or the breakout ability. J.K. Dobbins, another guy that as a freshman had a huge season for Ohio State, took a step back. Obviously, there's offensive line related issues there. The running back dependent upon the offensive line, but he really put in the work to become a much better player heading into his final season at Ohio State. So those two guys have risen based on their just crazy performance in 2019.
No doubt. And I like Dobbins. I think, when you talk about we talk about people's high ceiling. Well, we know what this guy's floor is. This guy's floor is a very solid football player, and I don't think he has the superstar potential, but I think, this is a guy, he could be a starter at the next level. He could just be one of those guys that outplays the running back selected ahead of him, and you're looking at a guy now that you might be able to get in round 3. And anytime you can get a starting caliber player, I don't care what position it is, in the 3rd or 4th round, which is where Dobbins might slide. I mean, I think this is going to be a great value pick. I think there is some de-emphasis of the running back value this year, and I don't know that we're going to see more than one running back. If we see any running backs in the 1st round, it's possible that there is no running back taken in round 1, and if that happens, it becomes a trickle-down effect, right? How far does that happen? How far does Dobbins slide? How far does the next tier of running backs go? And I think Dobbins is a guy that if you do miss out on the cream of the crop, the guys that we mentioned, a J.K. Dobbins or a Cam Akers even from Florida State is a pretty nice contingency plan.
So, Rick, it's interesting because we both grew up watching the featured back, and everybody had to have the Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Jerome Bettis, whomever. And then obviously it was devalued. Just, we can plug in anybody. We need the linemen. We need the guys to create the space. But, we got 15 guys that we can go to at the draft. So wait to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. And then we had a bit of a comeback with breakout seasons from guys like Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Christian McCaffrey, where it seemed to come back to, well, there might be some differentiation between those elite guys, but maybe not necessarily this year.
I just think at the end of the day, I've been a firm believer that in today's modern day NFL, running backs don't carry you to the Super Bowl. So as good as Saquon Barkley is, as good as Ezekiel Elliott is, as good as Todd Gurley was and maybe still is, not even Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders. I mean, none of these guys ever carried their team on their back. And then you take a look at some of the success where, hey, the Chargers drafted Melvin Gordon really high, refused to pay him that big money, and they went with an undrafted guy, Austin Eckler, who was just as productive. And I think every year you kind of see that trend. CJ Anderson a couple years ago with the Rams when Gurley was injured there, they found this guy off the street and he ran him into the Super Bowl. So I think, you can always find a running back. I think more than any position, there's always a running back. And depending on your system, your scheme, you can wait till the later rounds. You can wait till undraft. I mean, even Melvin Gordon now, he signed an $8 million deal with Denver. And I'm not so sure he's going to beat out Philip Lindsay, who was undrafted and is earning $1 million this year. So why invest? Why invest all this money in a Le'Veon Bell when you can get a guy in the draft or even undrafted? And it's just my point of view, but I think a lot of teams kind of share that sentiment in the league.
Sure, Philip Lindsay's gained 11 or 1,200 yards twice, so I don't necessarily know that Melvin Gordon's going to do much better than that.